Hey y'all, it is tax season and I know you have questions about how do I file with my spouse? Am I supposed to file with them? Can I file separately? Can I file head of household? Well, you are at the right video. I'm going to talk to you about how you can file for your spouse, my recommendations when it comes to filing, and how you can file with a spouse that does not have a social security number, which is what most people are concerned about. So let's talk about it. I'm Lilly and Chukura. I'm a U.S. immigration attorney, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. Before we get into my recommendations and talking about taxes, let me just do a quick disclaimer. I am not a tax attorney and I am not a CPA. But what I can tell you is that there are certain filing statuses that raise red flags for USCIS, and I want to make sure that you avoid those red flags. So let's talk about what those red flags are and how you can avoid it. When you are filing your taxes, and you also are filing a green card application, you really need to be careful about what your tax status is, right? When you're filing your taxes, it gives you the option of filing single, head of household, married filing jointly, married filing separately. Those are the 4 options you have. And sometimes people think they can just pick whichever option they want. Well, when you're married, your options are limited. Okay? When you're married, your options are limited. You can either file married filing jointly, married filing separately, or head of household. You can only file head of household while you're married if you did not live with your spouse the last 6 months of the year. If you did live with your spouse the whole year, or, at some point the last 6 months of the year, you cannot file head of household. So if you're living with your spouse, your realistic options are married filing jointly or married filing separately. Now, someone out there is going to tell me, well, I got married in December. Does that even count? Yes. Yes. The IRS is looking at the last day of the year. Okay? So on December 31st, 2023, were you married? Yes or no? That's the question, right? If you got married on January 1st, okay then, don't worry about it, right? If you got married on January 1st, 2024, you don't need to even consider it because you weren't married in 2023. If you were married on December 31st, 2023, guess what? You are considered married for the entire year, not just for the one day or for the 1 month that you were married. Okay, you are considered married. So your options, like I said, would end up being married filing separately, married filing jointly, or head of household. Now, if you're living with your spouse, head of household is not an option that's available to you. Okay, if you're living with your spouse, head of household is not an option that's available to you. If you're filing a marriage-based green card application and you're telling USCIS, I am married to this person, we are living together, we are building a life together, and then you go and file your tax return and you say that you are head of household or that you are single, you see how you're telling USCIS something completely different from what you're telling the IRS, and that's going to raise a red flag. USCIS, when they're looking at the marriage-based green card application, they're looking to see if the people, right, the couple, are holding themselves out to the world as a married couple. Are you presenting yourself as a married couple? And if your tax returns is saying that you're single, or if your tax return is saying that you're head of household, while you're telling USCIS that you are married and you are living together and you're building a life together, that's going to raise red flags. Okay, that is going to raise red flags. So you want to make sure that your filing status matches what you're telling USCIS at all times. Now, let me answer the biggest question people have. when it comes to this. Every time I talk to someone about their tax filing status and all this stuff, the first thing they tell me is, well, my spouse doesn't have a social security number, so we couldn't file together. Or, my spouse didn't work, so we didn't file together. Well, okay, there's a fix for that. Right? Just because your spouse doesn't have a social security number doesn't mean that you cannot file your tax returns jointly. Your spouse can apply for an ITIN, an individual tax identification number. When they apply for the ITIN, you are able to file your taxes together and put in the ITIN application all at the same time. You must file the ITIN application with a tax return. So when you're filing your tax return, that is the time to file for the ITIN as well. Just a quick tip. Not every tax preparer will do the ITIN for you. However, if you get an acceptance agent, so the IRS has a list of accepted agents by state. So if you get an acceptance agent in your area that can do your tax return and your ITIN application, that is the fastest way to get the ITIN. Because if you go to someone that's not an acceptance agent, they will most likely need to take your passport, mail it in with the application, wait for the ITIN to be approved, and your passport to be mailed back to you. Yeah, that is the process. But if you go to an acceptance agent, they can look at the passport, they can look at the documents, and basically tell the IRS, we know that this person is who they say they are. We've looked at their documents. This is copies of the documents, blah, blah, blah. They can send that over to the IRS with the application. But if you do not go to an acceptance agent, just know that you will need to mail in the passport with it. So just word of caution / tip, go with an acceptance agent. Because there is the ITIN, the IRS does not accept you saying that you cannot file together because your spouse doesn't have a social security number. The ITIN was created for that particular purpose, for someone that does not have a social security number to be able to still file a tax return. So in this situation, the USCIS officer is not going to buy, oh, my spouse doesn't have a social security number, blah, blah, blah. No, because the IRS already created an avenue for you to do that. Okay? So that's no longer an excuse. Now that you're watching this, you know that is no longer an excuse that you can use because you've watched my video, right? All right. If your spouse does not live in the U.S., then your options are a little more open, right? If your spouse does not live in the U.S., you can choose to file married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household. The options abound, right? But you should, again, be talking to your tax person, because if you decide to file, let's say married filing jointly because it gives you a better tax situation, and your spouse lives in another country and they work in that other country, their income, their worldwide income will need to be taxed as well. So even if your spouse is not in the U.S. and you decide to do married filing jointly, which you can, right? The IRS allows you to do that. But that also means that your spouse's worldwide income, meaning income they earned anywhere in the world, not in the U.S. because they're not here. Income they earned anywhere in the world can be taxed by the IRS. So you will need to disclose that income in order to file jointly. Okay, so your spouse that's outside of the U.S. can also get an ITIN. There's a different procedure for that, but they can also get an ITIN. And if they get an ITIN, then you can file jointly. And if they're working, just remind them that they will need to disclose their worldwide income and potentially get taxed in the U.S. So if your spouse is not in the U.S., you have more options as far as filing status. USCIS The embassy does not really bother you that much when your spouse is not in the US. But, when your spouse is in the US and is living with you, you really only have two options. Because guess what? If you file a tax return that says you're single when you're actually married, and you come to my office to file your green card application, when I look at that tax return, I'm going to send you back to your tax person and tell you to change your filing status, which means you're going to need to amend your tax return. So to avoid having to amend your tax return, just do it right the first time and do not choose a filing status that indicates to USCIS that you're not actually married when you're actually married and building a life together. All right. A tax return, some people will tell me, oh, I don't want to file jointly. I just want to have my own tax file. That's fine. Okay? Filing separately is completely fine. It's filing anything other than married, right? Married filing separately, fine. Married filing jointly, fine. It's when you start filing single, head of household, while you're living with your spouse, while you're building a life with your spouse, that's where the red flags go off for USCIS, because you're basically presenting to the government on your tax return that you're not married, and you're presenting to USCIS on the green card application that you are married and you are living together and you are building a life together. So you're telling the government two different things. Yes, it's two different government agencies, but still the government, okay? You want to make sure that whatever you're giving the government is consistent, because if you are not consistent in how you're presenting yourself, your marriage, USCIS can pick up on that and they can decide to take away your ability to file for your spouse. Making sure that you file your taxes correctly is one thing that you can do to make sure that your green card process goes on smoothly, because when there's any hiccups, when there's any inconsistencies with your tax return and your green card application, that's where you're going to have some issues. And this is a minor thing that you can take care of on the front end so that it does not become an issue when you're filing your green card application. If you are looking to get a green card for yourself or your family and you want to do it with me, go ahead and schedule a strategy session so that we can talk about who qualifies, what you need to do to give yourself a leg up in the process, and how we can work together. To do this, go to my website, lillylegal.com, or call my office at 508-443-1788.